Hi, I'm Chad, and if you've been tuned into my channel, you will know that I love motorcycles. I love riding motorcycles, I love racing motorcycles, I love working on motorcycles, and I love talking about motorcycles. But you may not know that my passion for motorcycles actually stems from cars, and this car specifically. This is a 2009 Audi R8 4.2, and there are a lot of things that make this car really special in my opinion. Right behind me, we have a naturally aspirated 4.2 liter V8 engine that revs over 8,000 RPM, produces 420 horsepower at 7,800 RPM, 317 foot-pounds of torque between 4,500 and 6,000 RPM, and one of the greatest sounds I have ever heard in my life. Now, this V8 engine is also paired to a 6-speed manual transmission derived from the Lamborghini Gallardo, and it's surrounded by this metal shift gate that is exceptionally beautiful and rare. All four wheels are driven by the sportiest iteration of Audi's signature Quattro all-wheel drive system. I'm surrounded by leather in many places. You would find plastic or rubber in most cars, but the thing that makes this car most special, in my opinion, is the fact that it's mine. So in this video, I'm gonna go for a little drive. I'm gonna tell you about what it's like to drive this car, what it's been like to own this car, and also about the significance that this car holds in my life. So with that, let's hit the road. Whew. Oh man, there's nothing quite like that. I should say nothing else quite like that. That's special. Whew. Before I get into talking about what the car is like to drive, I just have to give you a little bit of context. I'm gonna talk much more in depth about this car's meaning to me later on in the video, but you have to know before we go into this that this has been my dream car since I learned how to drive. I saw this car in Iron Man in 2009. I was a year behind the curve. The movie came out in 2008, as did the car. But when I saw that movie, I was just learning how to drive. I was a skater kid before that. Had no interest in cars other than getting myself and my friends from point A to point B to skate. But that pivotal scene in Iron Man completely changed my life. So I saw it then, and it was the first time I ever had an emotional response to a motor vehicle. And I knew I just had to have one at some point. I bought it with about 27,000 miles on it. Now we're approaching 30,000 pretty quick. And I bought it back in the beginning of October of this year, October 2022. So the car was originally from Canada. It was sold in Canada, Toronto specifically. It was imported to California in early 2021, and then I bought it in October of 2022. So that's why you see the little bumperette things up on the front bumper there. Those were Canadian spec bumperettes that were only required in 2008 and 2009 for the R8. I'm gonna get those taken off. They're drilled into the bumper and like bolted on from the inside, so I'm gonna have to get the bumper removed, get them filled in, and then respray. There's a couple little rock chips, so I'm not really worried about it, but the car's gonna look a lot better, I think, once I take care of that. So, what's it like to drive the R8? Aside from a lot of fun. From a performance standpoint, it accelerates pretty well. It's not the fastest car on the road, it really never was, but the performance figures in a straight line are not as impressive as they once were. Well, that's not to say that the R8 is a slouch, it certainly is not. 420 horsepower, 317 foot-pounds of torque. If you know what you're doing with the manual transmission, you can get yourself from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds flat and do a standing quarter mile in, I believe, 12.5 seconds. I suspect it's not as fast in a straight line as a 2022 Mustang GT or Camaro SS is, but it's still a lot of fun, and the way that it makes power is so different from those two cars, and I think that makes it a lot more exciting to drive. Both of those engines, they're big V8s. They got a lot of torque, a lot of mid-range power. They taper off a little bit up top, which is also true with a lot of the twin turbocharged 6-cylinder engines that are available in a lot of performance cars, AMGs, BMW M cars. They got a lot of torque from a low RPM, but they still kind of despite having more power, taper off a little bit up top, and that is not the case with the R8. The R8 wants revs. It just wants to go all the way to 8,000, and it's just going to keep pulling you the more gas you give it and the longer you let that engine spin up. Aside from that, I mean, you can't beat pure, naturally aspirated, high revving V8 induction music right behind your head. It just does not get better than that, in my opinion. I really like that you have to work for the power from this engine. It's not just gonna give you all the beans if you step on it in 6th gear from like 2,500 RPM. You have to be a little bit more strategic in that. That forces you to engage with the car, with the transmission, which brings me to my next point. What's it like to drive the coveted 6-speed gated manual? So the transmission in this car is really good. It's very smooth, it's notchy, the engagement feels very solid, and the gate just accentuates that too, because when you click it, hit the gate, you can really feel that and you know you're in gear. That can actually take some getting used to. For me personally, particularly when I was first driving the car and trying to accelerate quickly, wide open throttle, red line shifting, when I go from 1st to 2nd gear and hit the gate, I would stop because I would think that the shifter was stuck and I wasn't in 2nd gear when in fact I was just smacking against the gate. But once you get used to that, it just feels super awesome. The sound that you get slamming it through the gates is great. It does take a little bit of getting used to. At first, I was making a few mistakes where I kind of get caught in between the gates, particularly when shifting from 2nd to 3rd or from 4th to 5th. But once you've run through the gears a few times, it's pretty easy to navigate, and I just can't get over that engagement and the sound. It's so good. Woohoo! Now the clutch feels pretty good. You get some good feedback through it. The friction zone is pretty broad, so it's not so difficult to get moving actually. It's just drives like your typical manual transmission car that has a clutch that has good resistance. It's not too springy, but at the same time not too spongy. And you can feel the clutch kind of start to engage too when you're in the friction zone, giving it a little bit of throttle. Now, as far as shifting goes, beyond just the feel of the shifter, we should talk about the engine and how that likes to be shifted. Because at lower RPM, surprisingly, it's a little bit lazy. You don't have to really slam it through the gears and be super quick with your actions with the throttle and the clutch. Actually, the car rewards you when you're smooth and controlled with those. Below 5,000 RPM, the revs drop a little bit more slowly. I wouldn't say it's like rev hanging, but once you cross 5,000 RPM, then it's like you're driving a race car. Close the throttle, the revs drop super quickly. So when you're trying to go fast and you're up at the top of the power band, you want to shift quickly. But this car really rewards smooth inputs, both with the throttle, the clutch. That, in my opinion, is one of the most fun things to do and is so satisfying when you get right. So now let's talk about handling, because one of this car's strong suits is absolutely the chassis and the suspension. The car is so neutral from the factory. The feedback that you get back through the car as you're driving is really nice. It's not too much, it's not too little, it's just right. Something else that's really nice about my car in particular is it has the magnetic ride suspension and it still works. So in the normal setting, it's actually pretty compliant and comfortable. I don't feel like I'm driving an exotic sports car. It's much more just like a casual sporty car. You do get a little bit more noise in the cabin just because you are sitting so low to the ground and because it has such big wheels and tires. But on the whole, it's really not that noisy in here unless you're driving over a really poorly maintained road, which there are plenty of around me, as you can hear now. It's a little noisy, but the car is not crunching my spine. It's taking bumps pretty smoothly. It feels good, but at the push of the button for sport mode, it's instantly firmer. The magnetic fluid within the damper gets sucked up into the top of the tube, if I remember correctly from the video I watched on how this works, but that stiffens up the suspension, so your compression rebound are gonna be a little bit faster, and the car is gonna have more grip on a smooth surface. So you really get the best of both worlds with this thing. You can throw it into sport mode if you're driving a technical canyon road, or if you're driving on a track, but at the same time you can put it back in the normal mode if you're just driving down the street or the freeway like I am today. Back to the handling. The car feels great around a corner. It's super neutral. There's not a lot of body roll regardless of whether you're in sport mode or not, and it just feels like there's grip. The car does what you want it to do. It's not vague in any of the way that it responds to your inputs. It feels really, really nice, and it's very confidence inspiring. Steering's nicely weighted. It's a little bit heavy, but not too heavy that you can't drive it around in a parking lot or something or at low speeds in traffic, but it has good feeling also. It is a hydraulic system, and that gives you a lot of feedback through the wheel. But the car is super, super neutral when you're going to turn into a corner. It's very agile. Then once you're in the corner, the car is very stable. There's a lot of grip thanks to Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive system, as if the amazing chassis and suspension weren't enough. But the car feels awesome. And then when you go to get back on the throttle to power out on corner exit, ton of grip, car just rockets out. And if you do want to get a little bit squirrely, you can put the traction control into its sport mode or just turn it off entirely, and the car will get the rear out of shape a little bit. One of the cool things about the Quattro all-wheel drive systems in this car is the torque bias is to the rear, making it behave a little bit more like a rear-wheel drive car than your typical all-wheel drive cars, but with that little bit of added safety with the front wheels getting just a little bit of power. And then that brings us to the brakes. And this car has some incredible brakes, if you ask me. They are 8-piston monoblock calipers up in the front on rotors that are a little bit over 14 inches in diameter. And the rear brakes are 4-piston monoblock calipers on rotors that are just under 14 inches. So the rear brakes in this car are like the same as the front brakes on like a Subaru WRX STI or an older Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. That's crazy. And they perform. The feeling's really good. I did have the brake fluid flushed out as part of the complete service I had performed on the car when I purchased it. The feel's really good. I also actually replaced the rotors and the pads on this car. The rotors are just OE replacements, and then the pads are Hawk HPS 5.0s. So overall, the car still brakes just as well as it did before with all the original stuff on it. It's just all new now, which is great. But those front brakes, you hit the pedal hard and they will bring this thing to a halt. It is pretty impressive and unlike any brakes I've ever experienced in a car before. And the feeling through the pedal is great too, even when you're trail braking. So there have been times where I've been going, I just want to take a corner kind of quick, hit the brakes hard, heel toe, and then start to turn the car in and then come off the brake, and the feeling's very good. I haven't gotten any locking. I can kind of feel what's going on with the front end. You can get a bit of that feeling of vibration from the friction through the pedal. It's really nice. So circling back to what I said before, just with a lot of added detail, this car is awesome to drive. It is a blast. It is so fulfilling and such a joyous experience. I absolutely love driving this car. So that brings me to what it's been like to own this car outside of just the driving experience. And it's been really, really awesome. It's a really cool car. It doesn't get all the attention in the world, but it definitely gets some. And usually that attention is of high quality because people that recognize this car are car enthusiasts. They want to talk about cars. They want to talk about this car. It gets them excited and it's a really cool experience. Something else that's really nice about this car is it really is something that you could drive every day. And that's what Audi set out to do when they released the R8 for its first model year in 2008. It was supposed to be your everyday supercar. And even now in 2022, it still is. Maybe the performance of a supercar isn't quite there. I definitely think it's a little taboo to say that this is still a supercar. I think it's an exotic sports car. That's a good way to put it. But it is, to put it simply, an enthusiast's luxury car. This is a car for a driver that appreciates the finer things like nice build quality, nice interior materials, being comfortable but still being able to have a good time and go fast and drive in a sporting manner. The AC works really well in this car, and I'm very lucky there too because it does still work. That's the other somewhat common issue that comes up with these cars, is the AC compressor either blowing or the drive shaft on it breaking off. But the key that I have seen people get the most success with is just using it frequently. So unless I'm trying to go fast and I don't want that extra little bit of drag against the engine when I'm trying to accelerate, I'm running the climate control, either the heat, the air, whatever, just to keep myself comfortable in here. This car's sound system is actually really nice too. This has the Bang & Olufsen sound system, and still 13 years later sounds amazing. I've got a little Bluetooth adapter that plugs into an aux jack that's in the center console actually, and the audio quality is very good. Beyond that, it does have Bluetooth for phone calls, and that's just native to the car, so that's nice. I can talk on the phone like I can in my Sprinter van, which is great. Both of the seats are heated, so that's nice in the cold mornings if you want to get up and go drive to Cars and Coffee. And it's chilly. It has a backup camera, and it actually has parking sensors both in the front and the rear of the car. So it's not super cumbersome to try to park in a tight spot or park by a curb. It's gonna pick up on that stuff, surprisingly. And the car, while it's very low to the ground clearance, particularly with the front bumper, is a lot better than I expected it to be. It makes it up most driveways fairly easily. I still play it safe and take everything at a bit of an angle, but on the whole, it's pretty easy to get around and not scrape. But even if you're not driving for fun and you're just getting from point A to point B, sitting in traffic, this is still a really nice place to be. It's comfortable. It's about as quiet as you could get for a sports car, I think. It rides nice again with the suspension in the normal mode, and it just feels really good to be sitting in this car. This car still smells like leather every time you open the door and get inside. It's really, really amazing. But it's been a joy so far. I've just been racking up miles on it. I've done almost 3,000, as I mentioned before, already in 2.5 months. And it's just been fantastic every time I've gone to drive it. I'm super happy with it. So at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that this car holds a lot of significance for me personally. I saw this car in Ironman. I was not a car guy before that. I was barely even interested, but this was the car that got me into cars. And if I hadn't gotten into cars, sports cars specifically, I wouldn't have gotten into motorcycles. When I saw this car, I became obsessed with it. I learned everything that I could about it reading online. I took an interest in other sports cars, which then led to me taking an interest in Formula One and motorsport, which then led me to take an interest in motorcycles, because motorcycles basically just have little Formula One-esque engines in them and rev to 15,000 plus RPM. It's amazing. And then I fell in love with the feeling of riding a motorcycle, banking over on the side of the tire. Just, it's so different and so incredible to feel and experience. And that got me into two-wheel motorsport. I'm a club racer. I have grown so much personally on a motorcycle and gotten so much faster, learned so much about being fast and being safe. And I have this car to thank for all of that. I grew up in Huntington Beach, California, which is a fairly affluent area. Newport Beach, which is very affluent, is the next town over. So growing up, I saw Porsches, I saw Corvettes, Lamborghinis and Ferraris every once in a while, and none of them really got me. I never understood those cars, but something about this car, its beauty, its sound, it just captivated me. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I would be who I am today. So thank you, Ironman. Thank you, Audi. Thank you, R8. I'm seriously overjoyed right now, and I'm so excited to be able to experience this car whenever I want to, for as long as I want to. It's a really special thing, and I'm super, super grateful for it. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would sincerely appreciate a gentle little click of the like button, and if you considered subscribing for more, I guess, car content, really motorcycling content. I'm still planning to keep the center of my channel on motorcycles, but I've got this car. I really bought it just for myself. It's been a goal for a really long time, but happy to share it on the internet as well. So if you guys want to see more R8 videos or just car videos in general, drop a comment below and let me know. Also, let me know down in the comments, what's your dream car? Do you like cars at all? Or are you watching this and being like, Chad, more motorcycle videos, please. I don't want to see cars. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll hope to catch you in the next one. Until then, later.